Yep, there we go. Okay, so welcome everybody to week 3. We're going to be focusing on the practice of believe, of really creating fierce confidence in ourselves about how wonderful we are, how wonderful our life is, and our ability to get healthier. So that's what we're going to be working on today. And I just want to remind everybody that you're all muted, so you can make as much noise as you want to. And if you need to, if you want to share at any point, type into that little area where it says type your questions here, and then I'll be able to call on you and unmute you. And we're going to go through all these practices until 3 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock we'll spend 10 minutes to choose our actions for the coming week. And then from 3:10 to 3:30, we're going to have a live Q&A time. So that's the plan for today, and let's get started. See, here we go. So our goals for today, what we're going to do today, we're going to investigate the importance of what does this mean? Why is it important to believe? We're going to be inspired by some powerful healing stories. We're going to explore how your beliefs can impact your healing. We're going to explore how your identity can serve you better, how you identify yourself. And we're going to investigate your resistance to change. Excuse me for just a second. There's some trees are being cut down in my neighborhood, so I'm just going to ask Liz to close the windows in the kitchen. So I don't know if the noise is bothering you all, but it's coming in and distracting me a little bit. So thanks so much, Liz. And so there was a reflection exercise that we did in the first week about what's stopping us from doing, from making some changes in our life. So we're going to do that exercise again, just an opportunity to go a little deeper. And after a couple of weeks, often we think differently about it. And then at 3 o'clock, like I said, we'll take some time to plan our healing work for this week. So remember to grab the course handout, your workbook for today, print it out and have it in front of you. It always, because we spend a lot of the time just going through those reflection exercises, it's so important to have that in front of you. A calendar, if that's helpful, a journal, and a place to write down any questions for the Q&A time. Now, I just realized that my view is not, here we go. Much better. There we go. So I love this quote from Oprah. Every time you state what you want or believe, you're the first to hear it. It's a message to both you and others about what you think is possible. Don't put a ceiling on yourself. So that's what we talked about in the very beginning, about coming up with an ambitious health goal, with an inspiring health goal. We really want to make sure that we're not limiting ourselves from the beginning about what is possible. So we're going to explore that today. What does it mean to have an ambitious health goal? How do we balance ambition with accepting reality? And we're going to get into that today. So what does it mean to believe? What is this really about? So I like this phrase, I am moving unstoppably towards my best health. And for those of you who are online and can see the image here, it's a quarterback with like rippling muscles and his veins bulging. And I love this image because what I like to say to folks is this is not about hope. It's not about, well, I hope that I'm going to feel better someday. This is about really trying to channel our inner quarterback. And I'm not someone who really watches football at all, but I've seen them sometimes on TV, and they come running out onto the field at the beginning of the second half, and they're running out and they're not saying, hey guys, I really hope we're going to win. They're running out and saying, we're going to get out there and kick some tush. That's sort of what they say. So I really want to encourage us to channel that inner quarterback of, I'm going to really take hold of my life. I'm going to kick butt in my life. I can do this. And what that goal is, we need to figure that out. But whatever your best health is, whatever's the best, the highest possibility for you, of the healthiest you can get, and the biggest, most, fully realized life that you can have, that that you're unstoppably moving towards it. Now, I want to acknowledge a couple things. One is that, if you're not there already, it can take some time and some effort to cultivate this attitude. We don't all wake up in the morning feeling, I'm moving unstoppably towards my best health. I'm a quarterback. That's not how we all feel first thing in the morning. But every move in that direction really does improve your ability to reach your health goal, whatever it may be. And we've talked about in the past that sometimes it's useful to use an understatement. If this feels too too out of reach for you to say something like, I might be getting a little healthier, and sort of make yourself laugh. To just use as much as you can possibly believe that I might be able to get healthier than I am today. To start with something like that just a statement that sort of is a real understatement to help you notice how much, where you're stuck in terms of believing. And then the last thing is that when you have real doubts about, if you really feel like, I just don't believe I can get a lot healthier than I am, or I don't believe I can achieve my health goals, on days that you feel that way, it's sort of a great indicator of, oh, this would be a good time to pull out my journal. This would be a good time to listen to a guided meditation. This would be a good time to call somebody for a listening partnership, to do something to nurture my heart. Because whenever we're having big doubts and discouragement like that, it's because some emotions are coming up and getting in our way. So let's take a moment to talk about why it's so important to believe, why this matters. So the first thing is that you're just more likely to make difficult changes when you actually believe they'll make a difference, right? That makes sense. The more you have faith that you actually can get healthier, the more likely you are to do the work to get healthy. Also, you're more likely to stay the path and get back on the wagon when the going gets tough, because we all know that this is a real research and experimentation process, right? We try one thing, it doesn't work. We try something else, we get, it's too hard for us, and we have to keep trying different things. And when one thing doesn't work or it feels too hard, it can be very difficult to get back on. But if we really believe that there's a better future for us, it makes it much easier if we have a vision of where we're headed. Now, also, sometimes lacking confidence can result in less ambitious health goals, and then that limits your healing power just from the beginning. So we want to believe that we can really, really get healthy, and then we're more likely to have these more ambitious health goals that will just help fuel us to get further. Another thing is, we know that having a positive outlook and believing that the future is going to get better, it just decreases stress and the negative effects that stress can have on our body. And then lastly, our bodies and our minds are just so closely connected, and our moods and our expectations impact our health in ways that we are just beginning to understand. And we're going to explore that in just a second. But, there's the book, Mind Over Medicine, which I mentioned in your workbook by Lissa Rankin, is a fantastic book. There's a lot of books like this, but this is one of my favorites, about how our mental state just has enormous impacts on our health. And one of the things she does is she explores the placebo effect, for example, right? The idea that what we believe will happen has an enormous impact on our bodies. And so in her book, she has these are three of the examples she gives of just really powerful placebo effects that happen, where in one study, nearly half of asthma patients experienced symptom relief from a fake inhaler or sham acupuncture. In another study, half of people with colitis felt better after they had placebo treatment. And then in another one, as many as 40% of infertility patients. Now that's a pretty objective measure. Did you get pregnant or didn't you, right? That this is not something that people just feel. But as many 40% of infertility patients actually got pregnant while taking placebo fertility drugs. So our minds have just incredible power over our bodies, and we want to try to do whatever we can to harness a little bit of that effect, to use some of that positive thinking. Now, as we move forward talking about the importance of believing and positive thinking, I want to share two disclaimers. The first is, and I think I've said this before, but I want to say it's important to say it again, I'm not implying that we can all just positively think our way to total health through sheer will. I'm willing to believe that it is possible for someone to do that. I think that in our world, maybe if you're looking at online, this picture of a monk on top of a mountain, maybe someone who has spent their entire life meditating and is at a very high level, maybe they could just, I think it's possible, just positively think tumors away or whatever. I think it could be possible. However, the vast majority of us are not that monk on that mountain, and I don't know if it's physically possible. And that's not what I'm talking about. For me, when I talk about positive thinking, it does help us get healthier. But even more than that, and even more practically than that, is it enables us to do the work that we need to do to get healthier. It enables us to do the self-care, to reach out for the nurturing our heart, to have the healthier habits. So that's really what it's about. It's not so much about just being a Pollyanna and thinking everything's going to be fine, and then it will be, because we know life isn't that simple. It's about believing there's a better future for ourselves, because then it helps us work towards it. Disclaimer number 2 is that there are some situations where we have to balance hard realities with ambitious goals. And Christopher Reeves in the picture here, I always thought was just such an incredible example of that, who, his hard reality was that he was quadriplegic in a wheelchair and could only move his head, but he was determined to live a really big life. And of course, it's easier to live a really big life when you're an international movie star. But still, he even talked about how the accident that he had and being left quadriplegic in many ways enriched his relationships and made him a better person in the world, and that of course he would never have wanted it to happen, but he saw the good that came from it. And so he was able to and he also did things like the whole time that he was in his wheelchair, he was working towards and trying to find ways that he would be able to walk again. He was holding out this vision of, I want to be able to walk again, at the same time that he was holding out, I want to have the best life I can while I'm in this wheelchair. And so for people who are wheelchair users or people who have chronic injuries or of any sort, there's a decision to make at one point or another. To what extent do I accept do I accept being in the wheelchair? And most of the time it makes sense to say, I'm going to go for my best health in this wheelchair, which is, an enormous range of how healthy a person can get in a wheelchair or how healthy a person can get with any kind of physical disability. And so sometimes there are these hard realities that we need to balance an ambitious goal with the reality that we have, but we can still do that. We can still have ambitious goals within our own realities. So the first step to doing that, to having those ambitious goals and moving forward, is really filling yourself up with stories of people who have done it before you, filling yourself up with stories of people who have really had incredible healings. So I just want to share a few of these stories of people who really were stuck in various health conditions and health challenges and were able to overcome it. So the first is my story, which I think everybody on this call has heard many, many times. So I'm just going to give the short version of it. That I was sick for 6 years and literally could hardly walk around the block, certainly couldn't work, went on almost no family vacations, spent most of my time in bed or in a doctor's office, was physically uncomfortable all the time. And, and through a really intense, very difficult, but really intense dietary change and lots of support, completely got healthy. And now basically almost never go to the doctor's office anymore except for checkups occasionally. So, that was just an incredible experience for me in terms of what can happen when we really put our minds to it. Some of you have heard the story of Zisel, who's a friend and a client of mine, who had really intense irritable bowel syndrome since she was a very small child, ever since she could remember. Basically, her stomach hurt chronically all the time, and every now and then she would have paralyzing bouts where she couldn't even move because, as much as 24 hours where she was just in paralyzing pain in her digestive system. And she changed her diet a lot to an anti-inflammatory diet and managed to really decrease the pain, but she still had these paralyzing bouts. And she did all kinds of research, and she did yoga, and she did juice cleanses, and she talked to tons of people online, and she finally decided, after seeing tons and tons of GI doctors, there is a blockage in my system because the pain is always in the same place, this paralyzing pain. And if I move in certain positions, it helps alleviate it. There is some kind of a blockage. There is something physical going on in there. And she managed to convince a doctor to actually do surgery on her and open up her stomach. And when they did, they found that she had what they described as a horror movie monster in her stomach, in her abdominal cavity, to be more precise. And what it was scar tissue from an appendectomy that she had when she was 4 years old. This was when she was 40. So for 36 years, this scar tissue had been growing such that it was like its own organ with its own vascular structure and had pinned a lot of her digestive organs against her abdominal wall. The doctor said they were amazed that she could eat it all. Once they were able to get rid of most of it, she now has none of the paralyzing attacks anymore. She still has to eat really clean to have, she's still very sensitive to different foods, but she has no more of those paralyzing attacks after having them regularly for 30-some years. So, sometimes we have to just really convince our doctors to do things. Debbie is a great story of somebody who was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic pain and nerve damage. They thought that she would just have shooting pain up and down her back and in her head for the rest of her life. And she ended up, the way that she healed was by completely overhauling all the products in her house. She turned to all natural, non-toxic products. She changed her cosmetics. She changed her food so it was almost all organic. She got rid of all additives and preservatives and added sugar of any kind in her food. And she did all of this over 6 months to a year. And by the end of that year, she had virtually no symptoms. And she, after being really almost non-functioning for 3 years, she went back to working and being athletic again as she had before the pain had started. So, for her also, it was a diet and products in her home, big change. Um, let's see. And then Tina is somebody, a client and a friend of mine who had serious infertility issues for about 8 years. And she also suffered from depression during that time because she couldn't get pregnant and really wanted to. And she was sent by the doctors to 3 different mind-body courses on how to reduce stress and cognitive behavioral therapy because they felt like she was stressed and that was causing the pain in her stomach and it was causing her to not get pregnant. And finally, she convinced one doctor also to do exploratory surgery because somehow they didn't find that what they found in the surgery, they didn't find through MRIs and CT scans and what have you. I don't know how. But they found a whole bunch of very small polyps, but really closely concentrated around her ovaries. And once they removed them, she got pregnant a month later. And look at that. And then she didn't have stomach pain anymore and she wasn't depressed. And it was, it was not all in her head. It was something that she really needed to convince the doctors to go in and look at. So it is different for everybody what our path to health is. It's really sort of miraculous how many different things can be going on for us. My brother Jamie had a similar illness to mine, sort of a chronic fatigue and aches and pains, but it was much worse. He was sick for 30 years. And actually lost 5 inches of his height and went blind because his corneas became misshapen. And he tried everything over those years. And for him, finally, the 3rd time that he tried macrobiotic diet and a new kind of yoga, he was able to completely change his health and turn around his health. And he was able to have a procedure done and then get contact lenses. So now that he can see again. He's a pianist and he has a piano studio. After having been literally a hermit in his house, in an apartment for about 20 years, he now has a piano studio with 30 students and he performs with colleagues around Washington, D.C. It's just really incredible. So, it's really all of these people had years and years and years of illness or pain or health challenge, and at many different points sort of felt this is never going to change. And all of them persevered until they had a breakthrough that got them to where they wanted to be. So it's important to fill yourself up with stories of people who have gone before, who have had really amazing healing successes, so that to help you remind you that, maybe not anything is possible, but almost anything is possible, and much more is possible than we believe a lot of the time. So what I want to invite everybody to do is to take a look at page 2 in your workbook. It says, "How confident are you?" And I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes, and you can take some time to answer these 5 questions about your health goal and, how much do you believe that you can really get healthier, and think about these stories that we've just talked about and answer all these questions here on page 2. And when you're done, please type in done. And if you want to share, please type in share, done and share, and then I know that you're willing to talk. Okay, I'm going to be quiet while you do that. Thanks so much. I see a couple people are done. That's great. I just want to give some more people a chance to finish up on the workbook. So as you finish, type in done, and maybe and remember that if you're willing to share what came up for you in answering these questions, just type share also, and then I can call on you. That would be great. Hi, Krista. If you'd be willing, thanks for saying you'd be willing
Yes.
to share. I'd love to hear what came up for you with this exercise.
Well, do you want me to go through the different questions, how I answered them, or just kind of my intake on
No,
it?
just like, just a real quick couple sentences, or, what was your main takeaway, or what was something that really struck you?
Well, my main takeaway is coming to realize first of all, my ambition is a big one. And I find myself doubting my ability to heal and doubting my ability to figure this all out. But when I got to question number 4 was where I had my big aha,
Hmm.
which is the one about prior experiences with health and healing. And the deal is I haven't had to face illness or health challenges in my life other than when I was born, and that's a whole different story. But so I don't have a history of this. And
Hmm.
what dawned on me was I don't have a history with health stuff to draw on, but what I do have, because that's how I feel stymied, but what I do have, I've had tons of other kinds of challenges, huge challenges in my life that I have overcome. And so what I need to start doing is start shifting, okay, maybe looking at health challenges, I'm like, what do I do? But okay, look at how did you approach these other challenges that were so huge? And
Right.
start applying the principles of that did work for me to my health challenges. So that was a huge aha for me.
That's brilliant. Yeah. No, that's so true. It's so true that whatever resources we have that we've applied, or skills or talents or ways of being in the world that we've applied to other challenges, we can apply them to our health. Thank you so much for sharing that, Diane. That's really smart. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Sure, I just called you Diane. Sorry, because I was looking at the next
That's
person who
okay.
wanted to share. I
No
know,
problem.
I know, I do that a lot. I know I'm talking to you, Krista, right now.
No problem.
So now, with no further ado, Diane, you said this is the last person we have time for right now, but go ahead, Diane. I think that you're unmuted. What did you want to
Hi,
share?
sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I would say that um, one of the hard parts for me is that the health challenges that I'm dealing with I've had for a long time, and they don't just affect me physically, they affect me, they cause depression because it's, hypothyroid, um, hypoglycemia, food allergies, all this kind of stuff, and physical pain. And the other thing is it's kind of the unfortunate thing of the perfect storm where it falls in a category that Western medicine is really lousy at.
Hmm.
And so it means paying out of pocket, and it means finding healthcare providers that, I don't know, have some kind of a genius thing. I thought it was really telling that a couple of the examples you gave, that a couple of the people that got well had a physical thing that was going on that was undetected for a long time.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
uh,
just Diane, just so we can, I want to hear what you're saying, just so we can keep
yeah,
moving to you, if you
sure.
can, sort of clear. So what did you want to share from this exercise, or are you sort of saying that mainly what came up for you is how long this has been going on and how challenging it is, or is there?
Yeah, I guess I feel um, it's been a really long time and it's been really tough and it's been hard to keep my spirits up and keep my energy up.
Yeah,
And
no,
it's been hard to find accurate diagnosis and sufficient um, medical providers that have an answer and sufficient support to hang in there and do the things that I need to do. So that's kind of laying out, I guess, laying out where you get stuck. The good thing about that is that it's a closer step to figuring out what things you need to put in place to make it better.
Yeah, no, for sure. And when you've had a health challenge for as long as you have, it's much easier for the discouragement to come in and get in the way of believing, and it's completely understandable. Like I said, my brother was literally sick. He was blind and a hermit and almost entirely non-functioning, and had been sick for 25 years. With all kinds of intersecting depression and whatnot because of his illness. So he was certainly an example of somebody who was super, super, super sick with many different kinds of things. The medical profession couldn't help him, and he just, he kept trying things, and it's hard, and so that's what this whole course is about. It's about applying all of these different things and recognizing that any time that we feel like it's not possible, it's too hard, I'm the one for whom this is never going to happen, it's too hard, that's discouragement that's talking, and whatever you can do, and I know it's really hard to whether it's reading inspirational stories or doing a meditation or journaling or going for a walk or listening partnership to just keep your mind believing that it's possible, that's really what this is about, because I know it can be very hard to believe. I know, and we could do a whole weekend workshop on just believing that the future can get better. So yeah, I just want to acknowledge that it's challenging, and that's why we're talking about it. Yeah, for sure. Okay, thank you everybody for sharing. So let's see. The next thing we're going to move on to is now that we've had a chance to explore, how confident we are and really talk about how difficult it can be to believe in a better future and that we're going to get where we want to go, and explore where some limitations might come from. Now we're going to do a little exercise that will hopefully help us get a bit more confident. So I love this quote from Buddha. It says, "What you think you become, what you feel you attract, what you imagine you create." And it is very true. Our thoughts lead to our feelings cause us to act, and then our actions create a large part of our reality. Now, I know some of our reality is created by the genes that we have and the environment around us, and I'm not someone who thinks that we create 100% of our reality, but we do create a large part of it. And one of the hardest things to do is to change our thoughts, because our thoughts lead to our feelings leads to our actions lead to our reality. Our thoughts actually do become self-fulfilling prophecies. So if we're all self-fulfilling prophets, we don't want to be fire and brimstone prophets. We don't want to be prophesying really bad stuff. We want to prophesy good stuff. So how can we do that? Well, there's a saying in Jewish wisdom, if you change your name, you change your mazel. And mazel means your fortune, your destiny, your luck. So sometimes people will take on a new Hebrew name and in the hopes that will change their luck or change their destiny. Now, that's not so much my way of doing things, but I do believe that if we change our identity, if we change how we see ourselves, sometimes that can help shift our fate and this destiny that we're projecting for ourselves, that we're prophesying for ourselves. So, for example, one identity that we could have is, I'm sick. And we could say that a lot during the day. I'm sick. I feel so sick. And that's a negative identity, and it might be true, but a more positive identity could be, my strong body is overcoming a health challenge. And I know that for me, when I made that shift, when I decided I am cutting the words I am sick out of my vocabulary entirely, I'm not seeing myself as a sick person. I'm seeing myself as someone with a strong body that's overcoming a health challenge. So literally, if I had to explain to somebody when I was ill, if I had to explain to somebody why I couldn't participate in a certain activity, instead of saying, well, I'm sick, I would say, you know what, I'm working on some health challenges right now. I'm just not going to be able to make it to that. Or I have a health, and it was just a whole different way of describing myself and of seeing myself. And it makes an enormous, enormous difference. So it's powerful to make this kind of shift from a negative to a positive identity because it's positive, right? That helps us cultivate a positive attitude. That's pretty obvious. It also reminds us all of the reality that given the right nutrition, rest, and exercise, and sometimes treatments and emotional support, our bodies really do have remarkable healing abilities. And it describes your current situation as changing and fluid rather than fixed for all times, because we know that whatever is going on in our lives right now, it can get better, it can get worse. And so we want to recognize that things can change at any time, and hopefully moving it to change towards the better. So now I want to invite you on page 4 of your workbook to do this activity of shift your identity. So first you choose a sentence pair on this page that best reflects how you describe yourself. Or maybe you could write another pair for yourself. One that I might do right now, for example, is I have an anxiety disorder, or I'm anxious all the time, or I'm too anxious could be my negative statement. And then I would come up with a positive one that's the opposite of that. You know, I'm gradually becoming at peace with myself and the world around me, or something like that. So I want to invite you to choose two of these, a positive and a negative identity or description of yourself, and first say sentence 1 a few times to yourself and write down what thoughts and feelings come up for you. And then say the second sentence, the positive sentence to yourself a few times, and then write down what thoughts and feelings come up for you. Okay? And the description of this exercise is all on page 4 of your workbook. And I'm going to let you take a few minutes to do that. And when you're done, please write done in the question area. And if you want to share, please type in share. That would be great. Okay, so good luck with this exercise. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I see a couple people are done. That's great. I'm just going to give you another half a minute or minute or so some other folks can finish up, have this full experience. And then we have time, I think, for one person to share. So somebody wrote they could share. So I'm going to call on you in just a minute. Thanks so much. Okay, Sasha, thanks so much for saying you could share. Let me unmute you just a second. Whoops. I think it seems like maybe because you're on the phone, it is not letting me unmute you. Let me just, whoops. 1 second. Yep, it seems like it's not letting me unmute you because you're on the phone. I'm sorry about that. I would have loved to hear what you had to say. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Okay, did anybody else want to share right now before we go on about what this experience was like of saying one positive statement and then a negative statement? If not, okay, then we're gonna move on. Oh, okay, Deborah. Great. I know this is not a shy group. Usually somebody's willing to share. So Deborah, here you go. You're unmuted.
Yeah, luckily I've had some practice over the last few months doing this, and today I found a new affirmation that I feel comfortable about, which is my body knows how to heal, and I take regular, consistent actions that support healing. And then what came up behind that, like after I finished writing that down, was just this wave of sadness over the challenges with my family relationships and some of the logistics of the household.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I was surprised, and I don't have a way. I mean, I guess I need maybe to do some listening partnerships or whatever around some of that. That would probably be the best.
Yeah, listening partnerships, journaling, prayer, whatever works for you to, yeah, because the truth is this trying, so much of believe is, a lot of it is we don't really realize, but we've sort of either given up on really believing that we can have what we want, or we've come to accept certain things that are really upsetting in our lives, and we don't grieve about them, and we don't let ourselves get upset about them because we feel like, well, this is just the way it is. But and then when we start jiggling that a little bit by trying to believe and trying to work for something better, these really big emotions can come up, and they can sort of paralyze us and scare us, or lead us to not take action, do something with those emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I love your affirmation, and here's an easy meditation that I do, since you're walking a lot. I don't know if this would be helpful to you. When I'm walking, I try to do sort of a walking meditation, and I notice just whatever negative fears and anxieties and frustrations that are coming up, and I imagine putting them in a little plastic garbage bag and like tossing them into garbage cans as I walk along the road.
Yeah, usually I live in a beautiful area, so I see lots of beautiful plants and birds. And the orioles are here right now, bright yellow.
Nice.
So yeah, that stuff helps.
Yeah,
too.
Okay,
Just grateful they're all still here.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you.
And Bonnie, you said you were willing to share a little bit. I'm trying to unmute you. Here we go. You should be unmuted.
Yes, I am. Hi there, everyone. What came up for me was I put in "I am exhausted," and then what happened was I looked at why I chose that, and it's because I resist an early bedtime. So since my accident, I need more rest. And I resist an earlier bedtime because I feel like I'm missing out on life. And then I get resentful and kind of angry, and I take it out on other people. And what I feel when I read "My body is becoming more stronger and more energetic" was hopeful, with a vision of myself getting more sleep and being at peace with it. And so this exercise kind of helped me get in touch with why, I say that I'm exhausted and why I resist it. So this reflection helped me do that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, there's so many interesting thoughts and new perspectives that can come up when we do this. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you know what? I'm going to ask you a favor, if you can write it down. If you can ask me about earlier bedtimes during the Q&A session, if you want to. You don't have to. But it is a huge issue. Exactly what you said, resisting an earlier bedtime is a huge issue for almost every single person I work with who has any kind of a chronic injury or illness, health condition of any sort, and it's a huge issue for me too. So I'd be happy to talk about that a little bit during the Q&A if you want to ask me about it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks for sharing. Okay, so thank you everybody for jumping in on that exercise. I really appreciate it. And now that we've looked at how much we believe we can get healthier and we've focused a bit on positive thoughts and identities to help us get there, let's get real and let's talk about really how are we going to get there? What do we need to do? Because we know that the reality is, and I know that this brings up, like I said, to Deborah and to Diane, you know, that these practices of trying to really have faith that we can get better and get healthier, it brings up a lot of big emotions. So I really want to acknowledge that. And so we're going to go one step deeper, and the emotions are still going to keep getting churned up, so prepare yourselves. Because we know that the reality is if we want our life and our health and our emotional well-being to change, in addition to changing how we think, we also need to just change what we actively do every day. And that's really why we're all in this course, right, is to change our habits and find a better path to health for ourselves. You know, we all know this these Einstein quotes, we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. Now, to be very clear, I don't mean that we created our problems necessarily. I would say the same kind of thinking that we used when we became susceptible to them, or the same kind of thinking that we used when we created the habits of how we're dealing with the problems once we got the problems. You know, we really need to change our thinking and change our actions in order to change the outcome. And then, of course, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Again, I've mentioned it a lot, that image of ourselves as ocean liners heading in a certain destination, and just small changes will send us off in a different destination. And all the habits that we have and all the actions that we're taking today, you know, are sending us in that one destination, and we want to make sure that we're sending ourselves in the best possible destination. So what I'd like to have us do now is to think about some significant step or change that we've been told or we think ourselves really can make a difference in our healing, but we aren't doing it, either because it feels too hard or because we're doubtful it will work, or because we're afraid of something else, or because there's something else in the way. Now, I'm not saying that you should definitely do that thing. I don't know what that thing is, but for the purpose of this exercise, I'd like you to have that thing in your mind. Often it's a big dietary change. Sometimes it's doing a crowdfunder and asking for a lot of money from people to be able to do something, to go on some, you know, go to a health institute for a few weeks and make a big investment in your health. Sometimes it's a certain doctor's appointment. Sometimes it's trying out a new physical therapy. You know, there's all different kinds of things that we know that maybe we should try that we haven't tried. And we want to explore that. You know, what can we do? How can we overcome that resistance? And in the organizational development world, there's a few steps to get organizations to change. And the first one is to identify the root causes of the resistance. When you have a big organization and when you have an individual that's resisting something, we need to figure out why. Why are we resisting that thing? And then we need to address those root causes. And then we need to take consistent, effective action to move us out of resistance and into action. So what I want to excuse me. So what I want to invite you to do, sorry, is go to page, let me just check and see what page it is on your, it's page 5 and 6, over page 5 and 6 in your workbook, Overcoming Your Resistance to Change. And this is it's an exercise that we did, like I said, a slightly different but almost similar version of it in the first session, and we're going to do it again now, because I honestly think if we did this reflection exercise for 15 minutes once a week, our lives would be radically different. So we're going to do it sort of every other week in this program. So I want to invite you to take 5 minutes or so, 5 or 6 minutes, and answer these questions, okay? And when you're done, hit done, type in done, and if you want to share, type in share. Okay, great. I will be back in a few minutes. Again. Okay, hi everybody. It looks like a few people are done. Let's see, Krista, you said you'd be willing to share. I'd love to hear.
Well, this was really interesting for me. What I chose to write down was riding my recumbent bike daily. I got one. I've tried lots of different things to work with my issues, and my doctor said, well, try a recumbent bike. Maybe that exercise will help and help release a nerve and all of that. So I went through all these questions, and it was like, yeah, well, it feels difficult, and find a way to reward myself, so on and so forth. And I got down to number 10, which is what's really stopping me. And what I wrote down was, I don't believe it'll help me.
Yeah.
Because everything the doctor has suggested, all the way up including surgery, has not helped me.
Right.
And so it's like I uncovered that I don't believe it's going to help me, so no wonder I'm having trouble doing it.
Right.
So I wrote down, well, how can I flip this? How can I? And so what I came up with, and I'll have to work with this more, but what I came up with was, okay, maybe it won't help me in the way I would like it to, but it certainly can't hurt me, and the exercise will be good for me no matter what. So I just need to flip it, and go, okay, well, maybe it's not the answer, but it's certainly going to help you in some way.
Right. I mean, it's also thanks so much for sharing that, because it's such a powerful illustration of why it's important to either believe in what we're doing and the possibility of healing, or recognize that we don't believe and deal with that in some way. Because really what we believe in, what we don't believe in, is having a huge impact on what we're willing to do and what we're not willing to do. So it's beautiful that you really got down to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to really working with that, over the coming next few days, and see how deeper I can go with that. So thank you.
Sure. Would you be willing to, can I offer another thought about that?
Yes, please.
Just one other thought is maybe, I like your idea of, look, there's other reasons to do recumbent bicycling besides just it'll, improve my pain. And so I should do it for those reasons, and not attach so much to it, and then sort of, detach yourself a little bit from the outcome. It could be useful. I don't know. I haven't done the research, but just to do a little research online, recumbent bike exercises, Googling whatever the therapy is and what your condition is, and seeing what you find, because maybe you might not believe it because your doctor said it, because so far nothing he said or she said has panned out, but maybe it might give you a little bit more hope and a little more confidence in it if you read stories of other people online for whom it's been effective.
Great idea. Thank you. Yes, I will do that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks a lot for sharing, Krista. I appreciate it. That was a great little nugget there. So we have just a couple minutes until 3 o'clock. Let's see. I lost my spot here, and I'm finding it again. So as we wind up, I just want to remind you that what I said earlier in the session today is that this is a really challenging session emotionally. My goal in putting this all together was that we all push back against any limiting beliefs that we have, and we uncover those limiting beliefs, like Krista was just talking about. So feelings are going to come up, feelings of discouragement or of frustration. Today during this session and as we go forward in the week, it's so important to acknowledge them and to handle them in whatever way we can. Like I said, whether it's journaling or prayer or meditation or doing a listening partnership, because it's important for us to remember, and I love this quote from Thomas Edison, our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. So I wouldn't say it's a weakness necessarily, but maybe the biggest obstacle to success is giving up, is sort of buying into this isn't going to work. What's the point? I'm not going to try this. And the most certain way to succeed is to just try one more time. And especially when we've been dealing with a health condition for years or decades, and we've tried 99 things, going ahead and trying that 100th, or even looking for that 100th, can be really emotionally and physically and logistically exhausting. But, to pace ourselves and to do it in a way that makes sense for us, and and to keep moving forward and to not give up is really, to keep that stumbling forward, that forward motion going is really just a big key to eventual success. So I really want to encourage us to just remember that. Don't give up. Just keep holding on and get the support and that we need to nurture our heart to keep doing that. So I want to invite you to stick around for, it says 20 minutes, but it's actually 30 minutes. We're going to do 10 minutes of choosing your actions right now, and then 20 minutes of Q&A after that. So for the folks who can stick around right now, so let's talk about possible actions that you could do this week. One is to choose a set time each day where you could practice shifting from a negative to a positive identity for a few minutes. Maybe it's when you wake up. Maybe it's as you brush your teeth before you go to bed. Maybe it's when you sit down to dinner. But, a specific time where you can really spend a few minutes saying that new positive identity to yourself. Maybe you could take one step to explore taking on that change that you thought was too hard for you, whatever you explored in your overcoming resistance exercise. Remember to do your accountability check-in with your partner. And if you want, you can read practice 3, Believe, in Everyday Healing. And of course, the most important things to do are whatever's on your list of how you want to be moving yourself forward. As I say every week, I give so many different ideas. Read this in Everyday Healing, do this check-in, make this chart. Only use those things if they're helpful to you in moving you forward, and make sure you stay focused on what are the actions that you need to be doing to be achieving your 5-week goals. What can help you move forward in your own specific healing work? So let's go ahead to page, I think it's probably page 7 in your workbook, where it says step 1, 2, 3, and 4. Choose a specific week, a specific goal that you're working on, and then choose some bite-sized doable actions for that goal this week, and then estimate how long each one will take, including your prep time and your cleanup time, and then find a place to put each action into your calendar. And I know that, you've been listening for an hour and maybe big emotions have come up and you've been working on all these reflection exercises and you might feel like, I don't want to deal with the nitty-gritty of putting things in my calendar right now. But it's such a powerful thing just right now to say, okay, when am I going to do the things that are going to move my health forward this week? And I'm going to commit to them right now. And on page 7, there's that sample that I have for you of me filling in my action plan from a couple weeks ago. And on page 8 is an empty action plan where you can fill in yours, your action, how long it's going to take, and when you're going to do it. So I want to invite everyone to take about 8 minutes right now to do that. And when you're done, if you can type in done. And when most people are done, or in about 8 minutes from now, I will move on to our Q&A time, our question and answer time. Okay, so I will now be quiet while you go ahead and fill in your plans for the week. Okay, hi everybody. This is great. We have 4 questions for Q&A already all lined up, and there are a lot of good juicy ones. So far it looks like only a few people have finished making their plans for the coming week. I'm going to give you another couple minutes. As soon as you finish, please type done so I know that you're done. And then in about 2 minutes, we'll start with the Q&A. Okay, great. Let's get started. So I know what all the questions are, but I'm going to ask you each, just because it's nice for people to hear someone else's voice besides mine. Deborah, if you can just restate your question that we started with, that we came up with together in the in the pre-party today before we started at 10 of 2. Can you restate your question?
Yes, it was about dealing with the catch-22 of having enough energy to do the self-nurturing. So having easy enough self-nurturing activities at hand.
Perfect. Yeah. Great question. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to mute you again. Right, and what you had said was, it's a catch-22 because we can be feeling physically and emotionally totally depleted, and it's a catch-22 because you sort of need some level of physical or emotional energy to actually do some of these self-care activities, right? So I'll tell you, the time that I'm the most depleted, I'm not a very good morning person, although it's, there are times when I'm taking better care of myself or worse care of myself where it's much better. But in general, morning, first thing when I wake up is not a good time for me. And when I was sick, that was for sure true. So 3 things that I find that are very easy to do are guided meditations. So, and some of those can just be downloaded for free off the internet. Or, I love Chris Carr. She has a meditation album on her website. KRISCARR. I've mentioned her before, KRISCARR. And I just have that on my computer. And so guided meditations are one thing that you can do, that even if you're feeling physically and emotionally totally overwhelmed, just sit there and listen to a guided meditation can sometimes really shift your emotional mood, which can then sometimes lead to a little more physical energy where you can do something else. Journaling, to just sit there and just either write some affirmations or ask a question or tell a story, just journaling. And I'm going to say a little bit more about how to make these even lower energy. And then prayers, and if you're not for me, for folks on the call who don't have a particular religious tradition, for me, I have a Jewish tradition, and I can just open a prayer book and read and try to look until I find a line that's meaningful to me, and then repeat that line over and over again. And that will often help shift my mood. But if you don't have a particular prayer tradition, then sometimes getting a book of inspirational poems or quotes from Rumi or Deepak Chopra has some good books of just, sort of inspirational quotes to read, and then you can say them over and over to yourself. And now the one trick to all of this that I've found is I have all of these things on the bedstand next to my bed. So that's when I'm in the toughest shape, is when I wake up first thing in the morning, and the first hour of my day can either set me off in a bad direction or in a great direction. And so to make it very easy, I've got these guided meditations queued up on my computer. I've got my journal with a pen there already. I've got my prayer book right next to my bed. I've got my angel cards. I've got my supplements and my water right next to my bed, so I can wake up and do all kinds of loving, nurturing self-care without having to even get out of bed. So, you know, similarly, if you know that the afternoon is a time when you have a hard time or you get exhausted or something, to have a little station that you know you can go to where you've got inspirational quotes and a bottle of water and guided meditation, and you can just sort of recharge in a relaxed way for 20 minutes or 25 minutes or something. I'm just going to unmute you for a second, Deborah, and ask, does that feel helpful? Are those some ideas that seem like you maybe could think about?
Yeah, I do have to think about them more, because one of my challenges is also the space issue and making my room feel like a sanctuary, so this kind of feeds into that a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
But all that is in process.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Great. Well, thank you for asking that. Okay, Nancy, you had asked a question about healing stories. I'm going to unmute you and let you restate that question.
To know if you could mention some more resources for some additional inspirational healing stories. I find reading them really helpful.
Gotcha. You know, I'll tell you, nothing, sort of no book or magazine or anything immediately comes to mind. The way that I found the ones that I used when I was healing, it is really just internet, just Googling and keyword searches, and you know, and successful, you know, whether it's, you know, successfully healed from this, you know, successfully lost weight, successfully healed, ended chronic pain, you know, and you're going to end up on a lot of sort of crazy websites that are selling nonsense. But you'll also find interesting stories and some really cool blogs, and really interesting stuff. So it takes a little while to sort of sort the wheat from the chaff. But in my experience, actually, there's another source. One source is just internet, just Googling keyword searches and finding what you can find. And Miriam just suggested, that's a good one. Whatever you find, if you can share it on the Facebook page this week, or if everybody can share can share inspirational healing stories on the Facebook page, that would be fantastic. Thanks, Miriam. That's a great suggestion. And then another thought I had is Hippocrates Health Institute in West Palm Beach, which is the place where I learned about the kind of raw food diet I use to heal. They send out a magazine every month or every 2 months, and there's always tons of very inspirational healing diets in there. I mean, it has a specific take, the raw foods diet, of course, but there's always really inspirational healing stories in there. You know, if you want to contact them and ask them to start sending you their magazine, it's free. So that's another possibility. Okay, so was that helpful, Nancy? Is that what you were looking for? You. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Let's see. Now, Bonnie, you had talked about resisting bedtime. Let's see. I'm just going to unmute you. Here we go. Hi, Bonnie. So can I talk for a minute or two about resisting the earlier bedtime and some thoughts about that?
Yes, I would love that.
Okay. First of all, yes, for sure. That's a challenge that so many people I work with face. And I think one of the most, and you talked about a little bit about why you feel like you resist an early bedtime. I think there's so many different ways to approach it, and it takes a lot of different things. You know, you're certainly not alone. There are tens of millions of people all over the country every night who are on the internet or watching TV or eating food or whatever after 11 or 12 at night, when they kind of are half thinking to themselves, I really should be in bed, right? So you're certainly not alone in that. And it's definitely one of the things I struggle with. So a few things. One is, it's really helpful to just look at what going to bed was like for us as a child, and what sleeping was like for us as a child, and just any sort of lingering feelings we have about sleep and bedtime that we might not realize that we have. You know, one of my clients sort of, when we were doing this, realized, I've mentioned her before, but directly related to sleep, she realized that that the fact that she had woken up with terrible stomach pain during a lot of her childhood, and her parents sort of didn't have attention for it anymore, and they ended up kind of leaving her in the bathroom by herself to deal with her stomach pain for many hours at night as a child. She was just basically afraid to get in bed at night because she'd gotten used to thinking of bedtime as a time where she would experience pain. For myself, there's a lot of death around me when I was a child, and I had a lot of death ideation, thinking and fearing death a lot when I was in bed alone as a child, which I thought was totally normal. I didn't realize until I was in my mid-20s and in therapy that not everybody lies in bed being afraid of dying for many, many years of their childhood. And that helped me understand why I was afraid of getting in bed at night or didn't want to. So one thing is just it's great for everybody to just do a little exercise if we're having a hard time getting in bed, to look at just, from our childhood, what are our associations with going to bed and trying to shift those associations. Another thing which people may have done already is just a very sort of pragmatic thing of making your bed, and Deborah mentioned this, making her room a sanctuary, making your bed a really appealing place and making bedtime an appealing time. So, for me, that means, having a book. I get to read for 15 minutes before I get in bed. So sort of always having a book that I'm reading that I'm enjoying makes a difference. That really helps a lot. Sometimes I'll have a routine of listening to an evening guided meditation. I get in bed and I know I'm going to listen to a nice guided meditation for 15 minutes before I go to sleep. Or I have nice lavender or rose incense in my room, and my room is clean and it's inviting. All of those things also just help with making it more appealing. And then the other thing is just to, when we're in the throes of trying to get to bed but having a hard time getting there, just to remind ourselves what's going to happen the next day. What are the reasons why we want to get to bed? So for me, last night when I was having a hard time going to sleep, I was able to remind myself, I'm leading an 1.5-hour webinar tomorrow, and I'm flying with my son down to DC, and he's scared of flying. I want to have full energy for the webinar, and I want to have full energy for having a good time with my son on the plane tomorrow. I don't want to be tired, and to just really sort of think very concretely, why is it important to go to bed now, and just to sort of remind ourselves of that. So, Bonnie, I'm just unmuting you again. Do you want to respond to any of those things?
I agree that reminding myself of why it's important for me to go to bed at an earlier hour, I think that would help, and I appreciate your suggestions. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, thank you for mentioning that issue. It's a big one. And let's see. Diane, I see you wrote a couple things. Can you just restate, whoops, where are we? Your question about being a night owl. It's a great question. So I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question about being a night owl.
Sure. I just wondered, this idea of needing more sleep, why is it locked into a go to bed early as the only way to get more sleep? Like, why can't you go to bed late and sleep in the morning, or take a good nap in the afternoon? I mean, there are a lot of cultures that go to bed late, get up early, and the hot part of the afternoon, everybody takes a nap. I mean, isn't there another way to get more sleep besides going to bed early that is effective and acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, the key is everybody's different, and the key is to find out what works for you. The key is if your experience is that, if I go to bed at 1 a.m. and I sleep until 9 a.m, or if I take a nap at 3 p.m, that works for me, and I have the sense that my body is getting enough sleep, then that's great. Absolutely. I mean, there is a school of thought I do believe that is, that's definitely possible to be a healthy way of schedule and rhythm for some people. I think there's a few reasons why, generally speaking, people suggest an earlier bedtime. One is that for a lot of people, we just have a certain time we have to get up in the morning, whether it's because we have children or we have a job or whatever. the earlier bedtime is the only solution to getting more sleep because there isn't flexibility on the other side or there isn't time for a nap, right? So then we just need to get an earlier bedtime in order to get the hours of sleep before the time we have to wake up. Then the other piece is there's a lot of thinking that being awake and being out in the sun and seeing the sun is just immense, especially in the Northeast in the winter. Being awake and interacting with the outdoors, or at least seeing the outdoors as much as possible during daylight hours, is really, really good for our health. And so sort of to be a night owl and be awake during the night and napping during the day, it could contribute to some of the emotional and physical challenges that we're trying to overcome. So it is possible that, and that's a balancing act. If somebody just can't go to sleep early, then maybe that's the reality. But there is a school of thought that it's more useful to have those daytime hours. And Rambam, you probably know who he is, who's a famous Middle Ages Jewish physician and rabbi and commentator on the Jewish sources. He used to say that a 1 hour of sleep before midnight is like 2 hours of sleep after midnight. And that going to bed at 7 or 8 p.m., you would get such higher quality of sleep and you'd wake up feeling so much more refreshed. Who knows how true that is? But, I think that there is a feeling of if you go to bed earlier, you can wake up earlier. It's more likely you'll get a lot of things done around your self-care first thing in the morning and then have a full day. And you're also more, I think part of having an illness sometimes is feeling isolated from other people. And because most of the world is sort of on a get up around 7, day starts around 9, wind things up around 6 schedule, if you're not on that schedule, it can also leave a person feeling sort of isolated from the rest of the world. So again, the key is to do what works for you and to figure out what works for you. And those are some reasons why going forward an earlier bedtime might make sense. Is that helpful?
Sure.
Yeah. But yeah, everybody's different and we all need, different solutions for sure. Okay, I'm just going to scroll through and see what other questions we have here. Just a second, I'm just reading them. Just looking at a couple questions. Wow, there are a lot of questions today. We only have 5 minutes left. Marion hasn't gotten to ask a question yet, so Marion, you have a question about goals. So I'm going to unmute you right now so that you can ask that question. Okay, here we go. Go ahead, Marion.
Okay, thanks. I was noticing that when I write my goals for the week, I have these that are focused, like right now I'm working on my bedroom and sleep hygiene. But I also have lots of other things that I have to do during the week. And those are also goals. And I have trouble, prioritizing these things that I want to, especially some that I want to do daily, with the other things that I need to get done. And so I sometimes end up feeling like I'm not productive enough, or and one of the reasons, by the way, that I dread going to bed is that I have to the next day face everything I didn't get done the day before.
Right. Yeah. I hear you. I've experienced that. I have some experience with that. Okay. I'm going to mute you again, Marion, and address some of what you're talking about. Let's see. It's a great question. It's a big one around time management and how we use our time. Let's see. One thought is, in terms of how do you prioritize doing these goals for your health. And I know we've talked about this before, but a lot of I find in time management specialists say that the things that get done are usually the things that have an external deadline. We tend to, if there's a bill that needs to be paid, or there's a form that needs to be filled out in order to get something, or there's a work deadline that we need to give to somebody else, or it's somebody's birthday party and we're bringing them a birthday present, those things rise to the top of our to-do list, and we're just sort of dealing with those things with external deadlines, and we're not doing the things that maintain our life and give us a higher quality of life, the sort of self-care things that don't necessarily automatically get us a Benny because someone says, oh, thank you for this birthday gift, or yes, you've got your foreman on time, or you did a good job on the work project. But those other long-term, like doing everyday maintenance things are so important. So often, just sort of tricking our minds and creating an externally accountable deadline for those things, whether it's with your spouse or with a friend or with your accountability partner or with yourself saying, if I do this 6 days in a row, I'll give myself this reward, or, telling your for any of us, telling the person that we live with or a family member or a friend or something that we're going to do something, especially if it has an impact on them, committing to it and then saying, please let's check in again in a week and see if I did it. Just sort of creating those external deadlines makes a big difference in terms of getting things done. I also find that for myself and for a lot of the people I work with and a lot of what I've read about, this seems to be true, when we have a lot of feelings about feeling bad about ourselves for not getting enough done, it's often because every day we are sort of chronically putting too much on our to-do list. And just all the stuff that didn't get done the day before, we shove to the next day. And if we couldn't finish it all the day before and now we're adding new stuff, we're probably not going to be able to finish it the next day. And then we just feel bad about ourselves. So what I've really been working with a lot lately, and it has been helping, is just having shorter to-do lists. I know that sounds a little crazy, but just trying to work a little bit more with this practice of how long is something going to take me to do, really realistically, and taking into account my anxiety might come up. I might need to space out for half an hour in between things. I may, and really trying to be very realistic about really what can I get done today, and just having those on my to-do list, as opposed to having 4 things I know I can do plus 6 other things that I really want to do and then feeling bad at the end of the day. So those are a couple of thoughts. So I just want to give you a chance to respond if you had anything you wanted to say.
I agree. I think being able to make a to-do list that's reasonable is important, and your suggestion of actually putting those things in the calendar so it's like right there in black and white how long I think things are going to take is a help. And I think part of what I need to do for my health is to be able to just live with all those to-do items that are floating out there, and try not to be anxious about them and just believe that they'll get done at some point.
Great. Fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah. No, it's to figure these things out is a very individual thing for us each to figure out what works for us and how to move forward. So thanks for asking the question. Okay, so we have run out of time, and let's see. I just want to pick up a few notes on from the people who wrote. Julie wrote a book with inspirational stories. I personally have not read this book, but Julie is mentioning it. Bouncing Forward, Transforming Bad Breaks into Breakthroughs. That sounds interesting. So Bouncing Forward. You know what? I'll send this in an email to you all this afternoon when we send the replay. I'll send the name of that. And I think I covered all the questions. Somebody wrote something about nurturing habits, and I think we covered that and talking about Deborah's question about how to do some nurturing habits that are low energy. So great. Thank you all so much for being on the call and for really participating so beautifully. I learn so much from all of you every time. It's really, really wonderful, and I just enjoy being with you so much. And I will send you an email on Friday. Everybody, remember to do your accountability partnership check-ins and be in touch with each other. And please use that Facebook group. I know that I find it to be a real resource, and I invite everybody to jump on there and talk about how your week is going. So have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.